Hi, I'm Sage Justice. Welcome to Sage Words podcast and YouTube channel. This is just a short intro into what you're about to listen to. Thank you very much, Andy Mort, for allowing me to use the footage that you conducted during the interview that we had on this subject matter, and that being Mel Robbins' alleged plagiarism and confirmed usurping. For those who are just new to this topic or who are returning, who think that this is a conversation or a controversy about the origin of Let Them, it is not. Let me assure you, everyone is on board and agrees, everyone knows that the origins of the philosophy of Let Them go back to Buddhism and Stoicism and the Serenity Prayer and radical acceptance. In my own book, Freedom, I write about radical responsibility and using the word let them, and that was published in 2022. And of course, we have Tyler Perry's Medea and that monologue and T.D. Jakes. So all of that is understood. That's not what this is about. This is about a movement of an artist, an independent artist, having created a poem that went viral, that then became a movement where people were getting tattoos and merchandise was being created, and then a celebrity coming in, usurping all of that, claiming it as their own, that they created it. This book that Mel has done, it's the most successful of all her books, perhaps because she planted a seed in a garden that was already flourishing, a garden of Cassie Philips. So this is not a controversy about the origins of this concept. This is not a controversy over two ideas happening at the same time. Mel's book came out 3 years after Cassie's poem went viral. That's not at the same time. This is an issue that's very important, should be important to every single artist and writer out there. This is related to OpenAI. This is a seminal moment. We are setting a precedent. This is the first time something like this has happened after the popularization of OpenAI and publishers using AI to assist ghostwriters in writing books. This is an issue about integrity and Hay House Publishing and Mel Robbins and their practices and what they've done thus far. And just a quick little review. Mel claims in the New York Post interview that she had no recollection, no knowledge of Cassie Philips, and that's just not true. 6 months before she published her book, The Let Them Theory, she tried to trademark the term let them. It was denied at that time. One of the reasons given is because first used by Cassie Philips, the poet. If she had done any research about let them, put that into a search engine, she would have seen Cassie Philips' name. She says that her daughter co-wrote the book with her, and yet she didn't put her daughter's name on the cover until 2 months later after public pressure to do so. She claims that the origin story was something that happened at her son's prom on May 20th, and yet she tells us all that on May 13th, that's when she discovered it. And why would she change the story? Perhaps because the follow-up question would be, where did you discover it, Mel? Lastly, she's refused to acknowledge Cassie Philips in any of this, which is odd considering that she's been reported as being somebody who gives credit to a lot of different people, credit where credit is due. Why wouldn't she credit someone who started the movement that she's capitalizing on? So that's what this is about. And it's an ongoing story, and there's a lot of drama. And as you listen to it, I would like you to think about what you would do if this were to happen to you. And listen to the pushback. We're going to review all the pushback that people have given and go over it. And let us know what you think and what you would do if you were in Cassie's shoes and how you interpret the situation and what you see happening as a result of this. And if you are someone who's had their work stolen or usurped or plagiarized by Mel Robbins or anyone at Hay House Publishing, please reach out. We would like to hear your story, especially if you have evidence of the claims that you intend to make. I believe that a class action suit is the only way that we're going to correct what has happened here. So please sit back, listen, and enjoy, and let us know what you think. Thanks so much for listening and for watching.
Sage Justice, what a wonderful honor to be talking to you.
Likewise, I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm so glad we were able to make this work, and big fan of your work.
New fan, big fan of your work as well. Unexpectedly this year, it's yes, kicked off in quite a strange way, in many ways.
Really?
And so, yeah, I mean, the reason that we are chatting is around Mel Robbins' Let Them saga situation, whatever you want to call it. And yes, we're going to get into that. It feels like for me, a third part in a bit of a trilogy of videos that I've created, and you have been instrumental in writing articles via Substack that have, yeah, kept this story going and tracking the evolution of it as we've gone. I was looking and I wanted to start with a quote that I found, which is a very astute, wise quote. Be responsible for telling people the truth, not managing people's reactions to it.
Yes.
And somebody had pointed me to that on Instagram, a quote from Mel Robbins a couple of days ago. And it felt like a perfect frame for this conversation because it highlights some hypocrisy at the heart of this story, but it also is the approach that we have both taken in exploring and sharing the story with people in our own respective ways. So I've been creating these videos, you've been writing these articles, and we found some serious discrepancies in the story that Mel had been telling about her supposed discovery of the let them theory, which has really allowed her to appropriate and claim full ownership over an idea that she first heard about, thanks to the viral let them movement that had been triggered by a poem by Cassie Philips. And so we had both felt, this responsibility for telling people the truth once we started seeing it. And yeah, knowing full well we can't manage Mel's or her most ardent followers' reactions to hearing that truth. I will do a brief, proper nutshell overview of the story
Yes.
in a bit. But yeah, I'd love to start with how you got into all of this yourself. What caught your attention about it, and why did you end up writing the articles that you have about it?
Well, it was not my plan. I had no plan to do this. In fact, I had just finished an interview with someone who flew in from Uganda, this amazing woman who just has devoted her entire life to helping, her entire life of when she discovered the people who were in need there. But anyway, this was my focus. I had a whole series of people who I had either already interviewed, was planning to interview, or was writing about the power of one. So my first 6 months, of what I was going to focus on was already planned. And then, but it was New Year's Day. It's kind of my tradition to go on a, long nature walk and just listen to an audible and, just kind of set my intentions for the year. And I was familiar with Mel Robbins. I didn't have an issue with her. I appreciated her presence in that the overarching wellness community. So I had no beef with her at all. And when I saw the title of her book, I thought, oh, how cool. She's going to, she built a whole book on Cassie's poem. And I was familiar with Cassie's poem because someone had sent it to me at a really pivotal moment in my life where there was some deep, big heartache. And so I remembered her poem. It wasn't something that just kind of flew by. And I knew a lot of people who were familiar with her poem. And so I listened, and I'm listening and I'm listening, and I'm thinking, okay, she Mel hasn't mentioned Cassie yet, but now she's talking about let you instead of let them. Maybe this is Mel's contribution. But of course, it turns out, no, that was also Cassie's. She had two viral poems, the Let Them and the Let You or Let Me. And, that sort of, it was the same exact philosophy. And so I listened to the whole thing. And then the very end, I listened to it twice of the acknowledgements, the special thanks, nowhere in there. And it just made my heart sink because I had seen this over and over again of really organic, beautiful, authentic expressions of art from people with a smaller following or lesser known, and to see their work being usurped by someone. And I had also recently had, a year prior, an experience with Hay House Publishing that had set some alarm bells off in me, of practices and integrity. And there were things that I witnessed and discovered within the that publishing house that made me uncomfortable. Following that, it was about a year later, I think, was when the Let Them theory came out, and then I made this discovery. And so all of that combined, I just thought I just have to write about this. And at first I was just thinking, I'm just going to write and share this with my friends. I really wasn't putting a lot of effort into it. But then just posting that thing on social media where I, always go to the source directly first before you create any conclusions. So the very first thing I did was go directly to Mel. I had no intention of writing about Mel Robbins or anything. But once I made that comment to Mel on social media, somebody tagged Cassie. Cassie reached out to me, and the interview happened, and it was all very natural, very organic. I had no motive except for curiosity and sadness and a desire for justice, and to speak the truth, like you're talking about. And when we're at a time in history when everyone needs to have the courage to speak the truth. And there's a difference between truth and honesty. Honesty is what comes from within you. When you express yourself truthfully, you are being honest. But there's a difference between my truth, your truth, the truth. And we have to filter that. And the only way to filter that is through facts. And so I think that's what started this journey and just called to me. And the more I unpacked and unraveled it, the more I was called to keep speaking about it. And I think that's around the time our, paths intersected.
Yes. Yeah, it was just a scrolling thread, I think it was for me, and I saw a post. Yeah, it had the timeline that you'd put in one of your articles, first article, I think. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I hadn't been aware of any of it. And I hadn't even known that Mel Robbins had written a book. I don't follow her or anything. And so it just piqued my interest. It was at a moment where I thought, oh, yeah, I've got a few minutes to have a little dig around here. And then I started, looking. Oh yeah, there's all these images of tattoos from 2022. There's all these things that are there that reinforce these questions that are being asked about this here. And then something was just beginning to stir in me, as like, because injustice is a big thing that I'm like, I hate to see power abuse small people, and that powerlessness that just feels, it's a horrible feeling when you just feel like there's an injustice here, there's a truth that's being obfuscated, and I have absolutely no voice in this. And I thought, within the context of this whole Let Them thing as well, it feels unfair on Cassie to have to fight this herself, because then it's an obvious thing of like, aren't you being a hypocrite? Don't you just need to let go of this? And it's like, actually, she needs people sort of digging into this on her behalf and on behalf of the truth, for the sake of not just this story, but like the integrity within self-help itself, which is really the focus that I took a little bit in the first video.
Exactly. And it was never this desire to punish Mel as much as it was to protect Cassie.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so I went out, spent £23, which was £23 on that book. And because it was also important to me that I actually go to the source, and I read the whole book and was like, I trust Sage, but I want to see definitely for sure whether there is no mention of Cassie in this. And
right.
was able to confirm that. And then to see from there, okay, the appearances on all of these interviews, where this origin story is being reinforced and absolutely sort of pummeled into the psyche of everybody reading and listening. And this is a definitive thing that she wants to make sure everybody knows, that this happened at her son's prom. And then going back and seeing this reel, that my initial thing was on, I saw the 19th of May dated, and then obviously it tracks to the 13th of May when it first was released, which was then, again, as I sort of had a look, it's like, I don't know, her son's prom was on the 20th of May.
Yes, very good investigative work, by the way.
Because that just felt like that was the pivotal, like, aha for me, when it was like, okay, this doesn't add up, this doesn't track.
Right.
And put that with those words in that initial reel where it was, I've just heard about this thing called the let them theory. And then, adding examples that are applicable to her followers, that are essentially using the structure and the framework of Cassie's poem as a sort of placeholder. Insert examples here. And that's exactly what it seemed to be. So yes, and then before I knew it, I was in the rabbit hole very, very deep, making a video, and then making the short video,
which you did an amazing job with. And that's, visuals. Like I love conversations like this. When I was growing up, we called this talking head conversations. And I was very influenced by, like, My Dinner with Andre. Did you ever see that film?
Yeah, I've never seen it. No. Yeah.
Oh,
not seen it.
You have to watch it. That was a very pivotal film for me. But I highly recommend it. It's actually still one of my all-time favorite movies. But my point was to illustrate that you're creating the visuals that you did. Was so impactful, because we're in a society right now where a lot of people don't take time to listen fully and engage in just, two talking heads, discussing something, and seeing those quick little clips. I think I read somewhere where the attention span now is only 3 seconds long, where every 3 seconds you have to have another visual image in order to maintain people's attention. So you did a brilliant job with that. And I think because you did that, people were able to hear the words that we've been saying, and read the words that I've been writing, and that you wrote. They needed that visual. And one thing I want to bring up for anyone who's listening is, the parable of the emperor wears no clothes. When we all hear collectively Mel Robbins say, I discovered this thing called the let them theory on May 13th, and then tell the story over and over again on the book tour to various media, that on May 20th, it just hit me like a sledgehammer. Let them, let them, let them. Why are we accepting that? Why aren't more people saying, wait a minute, if this is an honest story, why do you feel the need to manufacture this origin story where you can say your daughter brought it to you, when you have already shared with all of us? We were all there, Mel, whether in present time or going back to that moment where we heard you say you just discovered it. And that's what creates suspicion. And it's not a tiny little detail. Like It's like saying in a court case, I think of like here there was a famous American O.J. Simpson. He was found not guilty from this simple little slogan of if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. That's a teeny tiny little detail, but the whole case was built on. This is a glaring thing to me. For why wouldn't Mel just say, yeah, on May 13th, I made this video about it and I shared with everyone. I just discovered it, because the follow-up question would be, where? Where did you discover it? And if she were to say from a Rumi quote or from this, I read this thing or this thing, whatever, she would have to, give credit. And if those people were dead and it's public domain, then it's fine. But I don't think that's what happened. I do think it was Cassie's poem, whether she discovered it herself or her daughter did and brought it to her. And I think that the probability is a, I'll just say possibility, to give as much grace and benefit of the doubt as possible, is that she went down a similar path that many people did. She heard the poem, looked it up, who wrote this poem, who's this poem by, sees this elderly woman reading it, then sees the name Cassie Philips, assumed that that's the woman that's reading it is the author, which it was not. Then look up do more, Googling, let them, Cassie Philips. And one of the early things that was popping up was this Reddit story that Cassie Philips had died. And there was indeed a Cassie Philips who had passed away. So, and if you are a rushed person, maybe with ADHD, which is what, Mel says that she has. And I remember her telling a story about how she brought in her groceries from the car and she just left her car door open for endless hours or whatever, that sometimes her mind doesn't, that she's moving so fast, she doesn't always, follow through or shut the doors or do things as thoroughly as needed. I can see in that moment, especially when you look back at the history of interviews that she said, where she believes that she's gifted and that she has this brilliant intuition. If she got that spark of this, I'm going to go with this is going to catch fire, then she may not have done the groundwork that she needed to. But what I still don't understand is she's had months now to process this, months to come forward and just have some grace. Just say, it's come to my attention that there's this young woman named Cassie Philips who wrote this poem, Let Them, that is very similar to this reel I made. And it kind of encompasses everything that I'm doing. And she was the first one to get the tattoo. And, merchandise was created from her doing this. So let's give her some love. Let me give a shout out to her. And she doesn't even have to say that Cassie inspired her. But at this point, with all of the scandal around it, for her to not even acknowledge Cassie in a way like this, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good on her. And it makes it look as if she's not mentioning her, because if she were to in any capacity, perhaps she feels she would then, it would be some kind of admittance that would cost her financially. And we know Cassie, as much as we know her, we don't know her personally. We've come to know her through this process. That's not who she is. That's not what she's about. That doesn't mean she doesn't deserve that, but it just, anyway, I've made my,
Yeah.
I think you understand where I'm going with that. I'm sorry if I went a little bit too much.
No, that's absolutely it. Yeah. And it speaks to that, the New York Post article where she was asked about the timeline discrepancies, which is the main thing I cover in the second video, really, and the response being, people can obsess over the details, and this is nonsense. And then focuses in on, I've never seen Cassie's poem, I've never read it, and it becomes, as time goes on, it becomes harder and harder for that response that you're talking about. And I think there has been space for that, and it would be still possible for that to happen. And for everyone to come out of this okay.
Yeah.
And it would be lovely for that to happen. And yeah, I think one of the things I was really struck by after reading the New York Post responses, and then reading some of the comments that come through from followers, is how actually there's an imitation or an emulation of the points that she put there, where there's a lot of deflection and a lot of
Yeah.
yeah, and like the very much the same talking points there. And I noticed a couple of comments from people that basically parrot stuff that is in her Instagram post when she included her daughter Sawyer in the on the cover. So I finally sort of put her name on the cover. Was it a birthday present or not? Who knows?
But why? Why didn't she do that from the beginning?
Yeah, it's another question that would be nice to have an answer to.
Yeah.
But yes, I guess to borrow a phrase, all we can do is be responsible for telling people the truth, not managing people's reactions to it. And yeah, well, of course, we can't manage or control people's reactions when we do tell the truth. What I would love to do is just go through some of the common reactive defenses, as much as anything, just to maybe develop a library of timestamps that I can go back and link to as a response when these comments keep coming in, and it's like I can't keep replying to these. I mean, I'd be interested. How's your experience of comments on your articles been? How have you found?
I mean, for the most part, I would say, I don't know, when I look at I don't know how many times it's been read now. I think there's over 200,000 views. I'd have to go back and look. I haven't looked recently, and over 3,000 likes on, that's just on one of them. And out of all of those, I would say maybe 12 people have come forward in an antagonizing, combative way, and without ceasing and bending and being flexible, that they feels like it's Mel trolls. It feels planted. It doesn't feel organic a lot of the time, because an organic exchange, and I do my best to always acknowledge a person, meet them where they are, and focus on the thing that they're saying that I do agree with, so as I really don't like that kind of combative. I just don't even engage in it, combative discourse, because it's useless. And so usually when somebody comes forward and is pushing back, and you say, yeah, I see this part, but here's the fact that I found, to here, you say this, and then here's the fact. And then if they just push back with the same stuff, like they're not even hearing anything, there's nowhere else to go from there. So it's been a very small percentage of people, and like you said, they are but they're bringing the same exact arguments, and they're taking the stuff from her post. And I'm wondering, why do they feel the need to do this? Because nothing in all of this stuff that I've written, I have maintained there's a place for Mel here. It's not Mel or Cassie. It's just acknowledge Cassie as well. She was here before. She deserves to have that acknowledgement. So I a few times I have written way too much, and because I'm thinking, oh, if I just spell it all out and share all the facts right here, I won't have to do it again. I can just copy and paste.
Hmm.
And then I have learned that that's not the case. It's best to just let people who disagree, or just feel like, I think some people feel like if they even allow themselves to consider a different narrative than the one that they are drinking in hook, line, and sinker from Mel, that they are somehow betraying themselves. And or that another like argument that I've gotten for years before all of this came up is, if somebody will put a quote up and it's misappropriated, some name that doesn't belong, that's drives me bonkers. And I always say, this person did not say this. And people always get their feathers ruffled by saying, what does it matter, Sage, if it's a good quote? And I said, because it matters, that the writer gets the credit for that. Sure, it's a great quote, but it's also it, it matters. Our work matters. So, yeah, anyway, there's only so much we can do, but I do think setting this out, like you were saying, that timeline and your videos of what you've done, I think it just really helps people. It paints a picture. And again, this is not about punishing Mel, it's about protecting Cassie. And I don't know why people are so resistant to this. It's not just, no matter how much good Mel does, it doesn't change what's happening. It doesn't change that she has usurped, you know, meaning there's somebody had something they'd already built. She came in, she took that, and she's run with it. That's fine. That's the American way. But why not just acknowledge her?
Yes. Yeah, quite. I share it's taking a non-combative approach and just meeting people where they're at and meeting the comments as they've come. And yeah, there's been many times where I've had to have a little walk before I respond to a comment, but it's it's yeah, and I get the most frustrating thing is the responding to someone who then just walks away, like they're not interested in a conversation. They're not interested in getting beneath anything or finding any truth or whatever. It's just, yeah, I just want to take a pot shot and that's it. But yeah, so I have a list of some of the reactions, some of the lines of defense that people have given, and yeah, maybe we'll just go through them. I can't remember how many I have altogether, but there's a few. And it would be nice to maybe, if we can, apply them beyond the story itself or beyond this situation, and think about,
brilliant.
yeah, how, like you were just saying with that, what does it matter if it's a good quote's a good quote? And it's like, actually, it matters because it matters. It matters. There are issues of integrity here, and there are issues that stretch beyond this one situation that impact how we engage with similar things in the future, or what we allow to happen and just give a free pass to. And yeah, I think there's some things that we can maybe explore there. So yeah, the first one that I have here is the idea isn't new, it's ancient wisdom. Cassie has no right to claim Mel got it from her. Including things like, my grandma used to say it, live and let live. That's been around for ages. This is in the Bible. It's Stoicism. It's T.D. Jake. It's Tyler Perry. It's Alan Watts. I've been saying this myself for 20 years. There's nothing new. Yeah, all of that stuff. Yeah, what what do you say to that?
What I would say to that is, they're right. That is true. And that's not the issue at hand. It's not that, I don't think anyone is claiming that that Cassie originated this idea. What people are claiming is that Cassie started a movement and Mel usurped it as her own. It's three primary things that are beyond the saying, let them, or the philosophy from which it came. Those being the cadence, this, da 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 da, let them, da 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 da, let them. The tattoos, the merchandise. This was happening before Mel came around, years before Mel's book came out. To not acknowledge Cassie is to not acknowledge a fact, to not acknowledge a truth. And one thing I'd like to invite, and I don't know where you want to insert this here, because you might be planning to bring this up, but since it's popping in my head now, if you don't mind, I'll just share. As a parent, I chose to parent before I became a mom. I knew I did not want to parent with punishment. That was just something that never sat right with me. And so I read every parenting book, everything that I could, to try to figure out, how will I discipline if there's no punishment? And for the first 7 years, it's about distraction. You're modeling the behavior you want. which for me was two primary things. And I'm bringing this up here because I think that it applies, which is empathy and reason. Now, before the age of reason, which is around age 7, a child can't comprehend those things, on an intellectual level, but they do comprehend it, I think, on an emotional and kind of, it sounds woo-woo, but cellular level. They're absorbing it somewhere in their conscience. I would say to my daughter, for example, I'm not comfortable with that when she was 4 years old. And what is that to a 4-year-old? But by the time she was 7, she had assimilated that information, and she was using that verbiage to communicate herself with other children on the playground or with me, whatever. So I think it's really important in this dialogue, every time somebody has a pushback of, I don't understand what the big deal is, why is, well, I'm sure we'll get to those other arguments, so I won't bring them up, but of that nothing is being taken from Cassie, to somehow bring it back to the person who's saying that, to empathy. Well, what do you do for a living? What is your passion? And what if somebody came in and did that? Would you want them to now apply all these arguments that we're saying? When does it become something that a person is willing to fight for? Why were you and I drawn to this and not other people? Why are other people resisting? So I just want to plant that little seed of empathy and reason. And when we use empathy and reason in our engagements, in our conversations, communication, conflict resolution, we don't have to punish. We're human beings. Everybody makes mistakes. We can give forgiveness and grace, and but without those, we're just going to go around and around and around. Without those, that's why we have war. And I feel like our species is too evolved to be having these conversations.
Mm.
We're better than this. And
Yeah,
so
totally.
that's the part I want to speak to, that I just, okay, stepping off the soapbox. Sorry.
No, that's really important. And one of the things that really drew me to what you'd written was the section on, cancel culture and avoiding that and finding a different path through, because
Thank you.
actually all you end up with is that perpetuation of the same cycles. And we are better than that. As human beings, we can be. I believe that with my whole heart. And yeah, I think it's important to find that other way of approaching it and giving that grace. And my definition of kind of gentleness as a firm back and a soft front, it like really, this idea you stand firm, you have principles, you have values, and you don't let people walk all over them, or all over people. But you are open. There's a softness to that front. Take people at their word unless the evidence points otherwise, and then you hold them accountable for, okay, what's
Yeah.
this?
I
There's
love
a
that. What did you say? A
discrepancy.
firm back and a soft front?
Firm back and a soft front.
I
Yeah,
love that. Is that yours? Is that
yeah. It's
something?
kind of a bit of a collaboration in our community, Haven community. Kind of coming up with
That's
this
fantastic.
definition.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think just coming back to those three things, really important. The cadence of the poem, that you can't get away from that in that
Right.
13th of May reel. The tattoos, I think one of the things that just really took me aback was seeing Mel take credit for the tattoos in some of those TV appearances, and they come up, and then in the book
Right.
there's all of these images, and you're thinking, well, the book hasn't come out yet. Where are these like, this is very confusing. Surely this is just
Well,
from
I
the,
think
the
she was
movement.
trying to say it was from her movement that led up to that, from going back to the May 2023. But the tattoos started in 2022.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, that sort of mm, don't know what word I want to use, but whatever it is that makes a person feel like they can claim that, when they know that that's not true, that is egregious. It rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, same. I think entitlement is one of the words that I would use, but
There you go. That's it. That's the word.
yeah. Yeah, so the second one, does it really matter? Mel helps people. Who are you helping? Stop trying to bring others down and do something good for the world yourself. That's one I've heard.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I know you're doing good in the world. I know that I'm doing my best to do good in the world. We can't all be Mel Robbins, and I don't know that everyone wants to be. Uh that is the ends justifies the means argument, which you did a great video about. And I've always felt that that expression, the ends justifies the means, is somewhat an antithesis to integrity. With a caveat, when you're in survival mode, yes. And I write about that a little bit. I don't mean to keep like trying to, but this is where my source information is coming from. So I write about that in my book a little bit. If you are stealing bread to survive, that the ends justifies the means. If you are cooking the books at a bread company so that you can wear a Rolex and drive a fancy car or whatever, then the ends doesn't justify the means. In this sense, it doesn't matter how good I'm not trying to take away any of the good that she's doing. I'm just saying, let's also bring Cassie. And I think, it sounds so repetitive, but it is. I think that's what people need to hear, because we live in such a tribalistic society that the minute someone hears you calling someone else into right action or calling someone else out for their behavior, they take offense. They want to get into that team stance of offense and defense. And this goes back to my core thing of, you don't have to parent with punishment, that there's a way. And essentially, to me, when I look at any kind of conflict, I am looking at it as a parent. I imagine Cassie and Mel as both my children. If they were both my daughters and this were happening, how would I want to resolve the situation? And that's the way I look at it, when there's wars going on in the world, that if these are my brothers and sisters, it doesn't matter where you're from or your religion, your ethnicity, where you were born. War is just so barbaric and antiquated, and we can do better. So
Yeah, lovely. Yes. Yeah, I was thinking about this one, and like, who are you helping? Like, go and do something good for the world. Like that that does barb, like it is like oh, ow. And but I was like, I don't respond to those kinds of things, because to me it feels like I don't want to engage at that level of being like, well, I do this, but
right.
but specifically in this circumstance, it feels like, well, this is my attempt to help those who share things. Like, I got a comment today, as an unknown poet and writer who doesn't participate in hustle culture, I do worry about my work being plagiarized. Thank you for the justice you're striving to get, for Cassie Philips.
Beautiful.
And it's that kind of thing, small artists who aren't in the hustle culture, they have no desire to become a social media influencer or to, be in that world, but have little power if somebody was to just come along and take or appropriate something that they've written. They might not even realize, they might not see until way down the line, and then they've lost their voice completely.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's that kind of thing that when I think, who am I helping? This comes from that place. This isn't about, me at all. And yeah, I'd rather not be talking about this, but it just feels important.
Yeah. And I would turn the question around on them as well and say, who are you helping by asking me this question? And why does it matter to you? Why do you feel like you have to defend Mel? She's doing fine. She'll be the first person to tell all of us how great she's doing. She doesn't need a devil's advocate.
Yes, quite. Mel changed it. She added "let me." She evolved the idea.
Did she? Because that was, that was the thing that surprised me when in the first interview with Cassie, and I brought that up, and she's like, no, this, I think she said, not, have to go back and look. I think she said that the let me or let you was even more popular than the let them, and when it took off. And really, and that's also, the core of my book as well, as radical responsibility, that it doesn't matter what everybody else does. We can only control ourselves. And if somebody is abusing us, in what way are we allowing them? Which of course brings us back to why you and I were so drawn to this and drawn to the justice, because we are taking radical responsibility and we're saying, I'm not okay with this, this reality. So I don't, my understanding is that what Mel, quote unquote, added was actually something already established by Cassie.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would add to that as well, kind of use a musical metaphor. Like if an artist samples or covers a song, they still credit that original artist that they've kind of built on, even if their reworking is more popular. It's
Yeah,
not theirs, you know.
exactly.
Yeah.
And in music, we're allowed to have, I don't remember what it is. It's some, and I don't know if it's different in the UK or the US, but we're allowed, I think, 4 bars, maybe 8 bars that you're allowed to use without giving credit. However, there have been people who've done that and even sought the permissions, and then their song is wildly popular, and then they get taken to court and they lose the money. And so it's sometimes, I don't think that that would be the case here because of the players that we're talking about. But imagine if there was that understanding of just lifting someone up instead of I've got to hold on to this because somebody might take it, of I have more than enough to share. And I do think too, I'm sorry, this is like hair or something is driving me bonkers. Um, and maybe Mel is planning to do this later. If she is being savvy, perhaps she realizes that, book sales eventually plateau, and maybe it was designed to, part of why she brought Sawyer in, um, when she did and added her name, because that can give another little bump to the sales. Perhaps she's waiting, and when enough time has passed and the book sales begin to plateau again, if she brings up Cassie, that could increase her visibility as well. That could benefit her as well as benefiting Cassie. And so it's all about how, she chooses to look at the situation. That certainly, that's what I would do if I were in her position. I would absolutely would not let this go, where I never bring up Cassie, because that is the wrong legacy that she's wanting to leave behind.
Mm. We'll find out when Cassie's birthday is. Maybe that's the date that it will all.
I know when her birthday is, but I don't know if she wants that public, so.
Yes. And so this next one is a direct quote from that response to the New York Post, and also something I have seen echoed in comments. Mel has spent 10 years shining a light on other people's work, so the allegation that she would steal someone else's work is ridiculous. And then aligned with that, that she's credited over 50 experts in psychology, neuroscience, medicine, relationships in her impressive 18-page bibliography. So she acknowledges people. So how dare you say that she doesn't?
I think she had to do that because the 18-page bibliography and the 50 different people that she quoted, that's the frosting to the cake of Let Them. If she didn't add that, what is she adding? what is the whole crux of the book? It's not the research. I know that Brene Brown made the research popular in the self-help community, and I'm sure that there's value there for helping to validate people who are on this path who maybe wanted to prove to their spouse or their loved ones or whatever. See, there's research behind this. So there's a place for it. But those of us who study world religions, spiritual practices, and philosophy in general know that a truth resonates or it doesn't. It doesn't matter how much research is behind it. If something resonates, it resonates. The two words, let them resonate. Everything that Mel added, it didn't change those words. It didn't change the meaning. It didn't change the impact. It's just stuff to fill a book. It created 300 pages from 2 words. Really 4 words if you want to be complete of the let you or let me, whatever, 6 words. Okay. But if you
Although
have,
let is included a few times there, so maybe is that one word or?
and also I just have to tell you, I've only had an hour of sleep and I just now got your joke from like 3 minutes ago of why it would, waiting for Cassie's birthday to release. So high five. That was good. My brain is a little slow this morning. But yeah, that would be brilliant. I would love for her to do that. But yeah, adding all of that stuff doesn't change the main thing. Even the Amazon descriptor, it starts with let them. It has revolutionized the world or whatever the thing is. It doesn't say the book. It says the words. And I think and even though those words were around with the TD Jakes or I hope I got the name right, and Medea, all of that stuff, it's again goes back to they weren't saying it in this way. And it's this very specific way of the cadence, the answer, call, response, the tattoos, the merchandise. It's the simplicity of a message, of a branding, of a slogan, of a mantra, just like Nike with just do it. And that's why it's so popular. But it was already popular. Cassie made it popular for years before Mel jumped on the scene. And that's why this really is a case of usurping.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And yeah, thinking about that Amazon sort of slogan or whatever, the tagline, and the thing about the idea millions of people can't stop talking about, and actually it is just that, it's let them. And it's not because of Mel Robbins that they couldn't stop talking about it or that they started talking about it. And I think some of the wordplay around, the word discovery is a good example of, there's been clever ways of laying these things out without actually claiming full ownership over it, just implying ownership and allowing people to draw those conclusions for themselves.
I discovered it, but it's going to be my legacy.
Yes, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah.
It's the delusion of Christopher Columbus discovering.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I landed on this place that was already in existence, but I discovered it, and therefore now you have it because I discovered it, and that's my legacy.
Yeah, and I think also with that one, like the idea that all the people that have been credited and acknowledged have these titles and credentials, and the research is a retrospective thing. So it's how can I find, it's a completely non-scientific way of researching, which is how can I find things to reinforce what I want to be true.
Exactly.
And so it's backing things up rather than, I kind of get the impression that Brené Brown does the research and then draws the conclusions as a sort of after the research perspective.
I think that it started that way. I don't know if it's still that way.
Okay,
And again,
yeah.
I don't want to, criticize her, but she created her own recipe, her formula in this landscape, and that's what works for her. And it is well respected. And I think because of that, it opens doors and gets her into places that she wouldn't normally have been. And it's valuable. It's valuable information. But ultimately, all research is confirmation bias. Unless you're doing double-blind studies or you don't know who you're working for when you do the research, whether it's on placebos and medication or a particular theory, it is confirmation bias. That's what, when you're on a debate team, which is really what the way I wish people communicated. If you're on a debate team, you have to learn enough information to prove either side. And when you do that, you become well-versed and you stand in the middle to see all sides. And that is how we find the truth.
A sort of Socratic approach to things. Yeah, absolutely. Next one. Why target Mel? Others do it too. What about Jay Shetty?
Well, if I had come across Jay Shetty and read something of his that I knew the poet, I would have probably called him out or called him in the same way. I have felt for a long time that there is a deep sickness in the wellness community. And it's just getting worse and worse, this appropriation. And I started noticing it around 2015. I really noticed it when Rachel Hollis had her book come out, that Girl Wash Your Face, I think was the name of it. That was very challenging as a writer to process. But there were a lot of common quotes in there that she was appropriating as her own, and she was being called out for it. But more than that, it was excruciatingly baffling to see that it was in, New York Times #1 list for a long time, I remember, and looking at that list and I just couldn't understand why. I want to be careful with my words because I don't want to criticize someone or say something, hurtful to her personally, but I'm bringing it up because it changed the American landscape of what it meant to be a New York Times bestseller. I had never seen a book like that be at that level on par with literature, and so that, and when that happened, it was an explosion of, it was pervasive and it became accepted. And it was, again, I just keep going back to the emperor wears no clothes. Everyone was just allowing it. And I don't know if it's because people are afraid to speak up, or they think that because they will get, harassed with like this pushback that you're getting, that you're sharing with me. Or maybe it's just that what she wrote was helpful to people, even though it was very simple, and maybe took more complex ideas and simplified them, which is something that, Mel says that she's good at, which I think she probably is. I think that instead of asking the question, why are we calling out Mel instead of calling out others, we should call out everyone. That if we allow this to keep going, what's going to happen is what some people have already said is happening, which is that we have a very, very small group of people. And I don't mean to sound crude, but somebody else said this, circle jerk. It's become that because it is a small group of people that are all in this wellness community, And every time somebody brings up something new, they all go around and say, yes, that's great. And we agree with that. And they're not calling each other out. And it's also becoming dangerous, though. I noticed Anthony Robbins, no relation to Mel Robbins, as far as I know. I remember when he came out in like 1996, I had he had this cassette tape thing of personal power. I loved it. I thought it was great. And it was very motivational, very inspiring. And that kind of, I think, kicked off a lot of this movement. A lot of people listened to his tapes or listened to Louise Hay, all of this, and then they just started branching off and doing their own thing. But around 2015, there was like a movement online of multi-level marketing. And there are all these women, stay-at-home moms, housewives who needed an income. So they were getting into like essential oils or whatever. And again, not trying to say anything negative about these companies. I'm sure there's good stuff with them. I noticed patterns. So I'm noticing these patterns and I'm watching that these women are kind of in these, I don't remember the terminology, but they had like people behind, underneath them. And what they would do is say, use my stories until you have your own, because they were trying to create followers. And this one woman that I knew that was in my community, one day I just heard her telling her stories, and it was my story. She was telling one of my stories, and the next day she was telling a story from somebody else in the community. And I knew that these were not her stories. I knew where she was getting them from, and they were allowing it. There was a lot of verbiage, and I was seeing that verbiage. I was watching these like conferences or what have you, where Rachel Hollis would be a guest or Anthony Robbins would be a guest at some of these things, or they were the main speaker, and the multi-level marketers were congregating to that area. I'm bringing it back. And then what I noticed is Anthony Robbins started to change. So at this time, this was our society, at least in America, was becoming more trans people, and the whole LGBTQ community was becoming more visible. There were more and more people who were non-binary, and it was creating division. No longer did we have this clear, this is masculine, this is feminine. At that time, Anthony Robbins then started, I think he met his wife, who shares my name, Sage, and there was this very strange vibe that like it went back to the Stepford Wives. Are you familiar with that?
No.
That's okay. I wouldn't expect you to be.
Okay.
It's an American reference to, I can't remember if it was a movie or a TV show back in maybe the 60s, essentially where men were able to have these women that they would program, and the women were just housewives, and they just did whatever the men wanted them to do, and everything was happy and pleasant, and wearing feminine clothes, and always with the dresses and the makeup and the perfect hair and nails, and taking care of the children, but not having a voice, not being an equal. And it was kind of a pushback to the equal rights movement here. And so this is relevant because this is how I see it tying in to when I'm talking about this sickness. I feel like there is a movement to control, bring back a power to men, that men should be masculine, and this is the male archetype, and this is the female archetype. And it felt very toxic to me. It felt like a backdoor to the Handmaid's Tale. And all of these kind of overlap, or they're part of this like circle jerk that we're talking about. Not necessarily Mel Robbins, but she's a part of the group. She's in that same group. And I think that it's time for all of us to start questioning, what is it that we're being told? Why are we being told this? Again, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot of good stuff in self-help. I think introspection is very important. Bettering yourself is, all of these things are important. But I also think it is important for us to look at what is the goal here? Why are they saying this? Why aren't other people pushing back?
Yeah, really, really interesting. Yeah, and the MLM story, the encouragement to take other people's stories and use stories is like that speaks to the Jay Shetty situation. Actually, like one of the things is there was a Guardian expose, I think, a year or two ago, where this journalist from the Guardian had been invited to do like a day in the life of Jay Shetty, and then when he started chatting to him and building this picture, he was like, not all is right here, and ended up actually becoming his nemesis by accident. And part of that was this origin story that Jay Shetty has about being a monk, and then all these things that he's learned as a monk in India, and then became whatever he is today. And there's all these, passing off numerous quotes as his own, and using, I think it's pretending to be affiliated with a university in the UK with his coaching school, and so some misleading things around his accreditations for coaches coaching coaches to coach coaches to be coaches. That sort of, which again is the MLM multi-level, like, you become a coach, you have a pipeline of coaches that you're training to be coaches of coaches. All of that, I think you're right, like that there's a link there that there's some toxic waste in the pipelines, definitely there. And coming back to that, why target Mel? Others do it too. Like, from my perspective, like, the only reason, as I said earlier, was because it caught my attention by chance, and I didn't seek it out. Like, I'm not actually all that. I used to read a little bit of self-help stuff like many years ago, but it's been a long time since I've sort of been in that world, really. So it's a bit off-piste for me. But one of the things I said to somebody who replied with that was, if you're seeing this, please contribute like your voice to this. If you do, find a way to take responsibility for telling that truth. This isn't what we do, but we've seen this particular situation and felt like we need to speak up into it. But it's no good sort of using that whataboutery to essentially just create a passivity, because you end up saying, well, what about that person? They've been really bad. Or this person, they've been really bad. Why aren't you calling them out? It's like, okay, if I don't know about them, but if you do, then absolutely, please.
You should, two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah, exactly. It's a strange argument. My next one is Cassie Philips. Who is she? Who cares about this poem? I've never heard of this Cassie woman. I've never heard this poem before. Yes, that's a common one.
One of the things that just gets under my skin is when there's an arrogance that I don't think people can hear when they say, I've never heard of it, therefore it must not exist. It must not be true. It goes back to that Christopher Columbus delusion. If just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it's not in existence. And I don't think there's more to say on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree completely. Yeah, I find it rubs me up the wrong way, because it's so dismissive, and the language that you often see used, like, seen it around Cassie, like, never heard of this Cassie girl, or never heard of this Cassie woman, and it's like, that's so condescending, and you are just basically inadvertently exposing your own ignorance. Mm-hmm. But as you say, also, I think it's a power move as well. It's my world is the only one that matters. The other thing doesn't exist. Yeah.
And it's a way that people have historically used to shut other people down. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier of why they work so hard to avoid a class action suit. is because if you just have one person, you get them in the courtroom. It's easier to minimize them. It's easier to dismiss them. It's easier to say, well, I've never heard of this, or, that sort of thing. But when you have many, then the whole game changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about suit or court, the next one, innocent until proven guilty. Why don't you believe her? Take her word for it.
I think we should take a person's word for it until evidence shows us otherwise. The whole innocent versus guilty is really about a judgment. It makes us the jury and the judge. And I don't like that paradigm. I'm more interested in looking at it of what is factual. We know this Cassie stuff existed first. That's factual. We know Mel did not put her daughter's name on the book until later. That's factual. We know that she made the video on May 13th saying she discovered something and then told this origin story that took place on May 20th. That's factual. This is all, the type of evidence that Mel was dismissing as saying, oh, obsessing over details. That's the sort of thing that Perry Mason settles a case with.
Yeah.
I remember what was it, that movie Legally Blonde, with Reese Witherspoon. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen this movie that came out 20 years ago or whatever. But when the she solves the case because she knows this little detail about not washing your hair after you've had a permanent. Details matter. And it doesn't matter what Mel is saying if it's in the face of the reality. If we're standing outside and saying, take my word for it, it's not raining, and the person is soaking wet, we're watching the rain just pummel them, what are you going to believe? What they're saying or the reality that you're viewing? And I think that's a larger philosophical issue that we are all facing right now. We get news, or we're getting information, and we are seeing with our own eyes, hearing with our own ears. Going back to George Orwell 1984, we are being told that what we're seeing is not happening, what we're hearing is not being said. And at some point, each person has got to find the confidence within themselves to discern the truth and to call it as they see it. And it doesn't have to be aggressive, assertive, or punishing to simply stand in one's truth.
Yeah, I think you've nailed one of, another reason that this has caught me and feels really important, because it's part of a wider trend and a wider thing we're dealing with. And I think this pushback encapsulates that or embodies it, because it's essentially saying, believe people, the things that they say rather than the things that they do, and the things that you can see. And yeah, like, my question with that is like, well, what would show you, if you want to take that paradigm, that she's guilty? And I think, you're not talking about a criminal case. You're talking about something where, even if, say, Cassie was to file some kind of case against her for like a copyright infringement or whatever, and won, would that satisfy people? And I don't imagine that it would, because it's, again, you'd find a way to turn that narrative into, like, Mel's the victim of something and it's a witch hunt or whatever it might be. And so, yeah, is the only way guilt is proved if Mel herself admits it? And even then, would it be she's been coerced, or her hand has been forced to admit it? So she's, like, I just think it's this catch-22 situation where you've got to be really careful taking that position, because it's just pushing the ball down the field and saying, I don't want this to be true, and so just keep kicking that. And that's where I have a lot of compassion and grace around people who have invested heavily in their following of Mel or in their following of whoever it is, that there's questions about the ethical integrity of certain actions, and your identity becomes somewhat tethered to the okayness of that other person. And if it suddenly becomes clear that, oh, not all's right there, then that impacts your sense of like self-worth or identity, and things start to crumble because you've built something on that, what I would say, building something on the sand of that, because anytime you invest that much of yourself in somebody else, especially someone you don't know and you have a parasocial relationship with, it's a very risky business. And yeah, and
Absolutely.
and then you sort of fight for that, even though it makes no sense. It has no logical integrity to it. But
Right.
it's almost a matter of survival, your survival instincts, because your sense of self, your self-concept is tied up in that. So yeah.
Exactly. I think you really tapped into something that actually I wanted to talk about, but I hadn't thought of uh until now, which is, I think that's part of what has kept me going. There's so much going on in the world right now. It's terrifying, in a lot of ways. It feels like World War III is around the corner. And here I am writing about this issue over and over again. I've had to call myself out and say, what are you doing? Why is this so important to you? Why do you keep coming back to this? And I think it's because it is my way to show how simple it is to stand in your truth and to have the confidence to speak up and to say what you see when you're seeing something that isn't right, to call out the emperor that who's not wearing any clothes. And if we don't do it, we are a quiet complicit. We become someone who is causing the harm simply because we're not speaking up about the harm that's being caused. And that's why I also want to get away from the words guilty or innocent. Let's just look at the facts. The facts are that Cassie was doing this first, and then Mel usurped it. And why can't Mel just, recognize Cassie so that all those people who are uh, fans of this movement can have additional material that they can use, and this would elevate Mel's stuff, and it would elevate Cassie. It is not going to hurt Mel at all if she took a position of grace, of lifting a sister up. I think it would only elevate her. It would only make people appreciate her. It would prove that she is the person she's saying she is, that she is the person that other people are saying she is, that she's always giving credit to other people. Okay, if that's true, why isn't she doing it now? I don't know. I'll leave it there.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. Yeah. And to just add on to that, it's the model of leadership that we really need to see. And I think it would be really, really impactful because it's so rare now to see somebody do that.
Yeah.
And maybe those kinds of things are contagious. Maybe they're not, but yeah, it'd be a good model to see. My next one probably doesn't need a huge amount of time on because the answer is probably similar to what we've talked about before, but it's the simultaneous invention, Elizabeth Gilbert defense. The same idea can land in two people's laps or minds. The muse visits two people at the same time, might be in different places over the world. And it
Sure.
just so happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it. I think it happens. That's not what happened this time. Because it wasn't simultaneous. It was, we have the timestamps. We can see Cassie's social media posts dating back to 2020, 2022, when it really went viral. And then Mel coming in on the scene, just a few years ago. So if it doesn't happen at the same time, we can't claim it's the same idea at the same time. And where do we draw that line? When do we decide, okay, now, this matters to me? I need to know that humanity cares about justice. my personal philosophy is we are all one. I cannot take Mel to task for anything I wouldn't take myself to task for. I cannot look at anybody, their flaws, their strengths, their weaknesses, without looking within for the same. I can only implore empathy and reason to each person who brings this up and says, if you were in Cassie's shoes, what would you do? How would you feel? And again, just going back to if these were both your daughters, if one of your daughters created this poem 3 years prior, and people started getting tattoos and merchandise was being created, and then your other daughter came along 3 years later and she wrote a book and it became a bestseller, and she was getting all the attention and all the money, and your other daughter was getting left behind. As a parent, what would you do? What would you want to see happen from that? And I just wish that we were looking out for one another, that we were caring about each other, that we weren't trying to get ahead and compete and rise above, make someone else smaller so that we feel bigger. Why can't we all rise together? That's where I'm coming from. That's the voice that I want to hear. I don't care about making anybody else wrong. I just care about protecting those who are not being protected.
Well said. Yeah. Yeah, it just made me think, when you say if they were your daughters, what would you do in that scenario? What the stories or the fairy tales and the great narratives that people enjoy, if it was that in that situation, just hearing you say, one daughter has created this thing and then 3 years later the other one usurps it, creates a book, makes all this money and doesn't give any acknowledgement to her sister. Like, who are you rooting for in that story? It's like, yeah. And these are the stories that speak to us as humans. They're the universal kind of narratives where actually then you're thinking there's an injustice done here, and I want to see right by the underdog. I want to see that. I think Cassie referred to it as David and Goliath in the New York Post, and which one are you on the side of in that? And again, it's not to say one should win and the other one lose,
Right.
but it's just who in your humanity do you actually like? Which position do you most empathize with and feels most universally resonant? And
Yes. Where is your humanity? That's a great question. For every single one of these things, I would say, where is your humanity?
yeah. And the final one we've got there. You're just haters. You're jealous. You must be working for Cassie.
I don't even know what to say to this. This is not benefiting me, at all. I mean, I don't mean that. I'm deriving benefit from this because I think it's an important thing to do. But first of all, I don't work for Cassie. I've never met her, only through social media, personal messages, and text messages, and leaving each other voice things. I don't think we've ever actually spoken on the phone or FaceTime or anything yet. I would like to do that. It's on my to-do list. But I don't work for her. I'm definitely not a hater. I bought the book, if I went, and it was $30 here, but I bought Mel's book. Mine was on Audible though, but eh, how can I be a hater if I was supporting her? And what was the other thing? Jealous. I don't know. How can I be jealous of s something somebody else doesn't have that I'm trying to lift them up? It doesn't. I'm not even in the equation. Like, this isn't a me situation. I'm just the observer. This is about the two of them, and I don't think that Cassie is jealous. However, I would say, again, bring back the empathy. Any person that was in that position, how would you feel? My God, a single mother, two young children, comes up with this poem. while working in a bar, has lupus, and then it goes viral, and people start getting tattoos, and they start putting it on merchandise, and then out of nowhere comes this bull in a china shop with her, green cover book, and usurping this movement and making millions, and won't even mention your name, that you were doing it as well. I wouldn't call that jealousy. I would call
No.
that devastating. Despair. Mel is creating generational wealth. You know what even a fraction of that could have done for Cassie and her children? Like, why don't people care about this? Why? Again, it's not taking anything away from Mel to raise up Cassie. So I really don't get it. I don't understand where the humanity is. I'm not interested in punishing Mel. I'm not interested in convicting her. I'm not interested in if she's got an audience, and if this message is permeating society and it's helping people, that's great. Just acknowledge Cassie.
Yeah.
Lift her up too. I
Yeah.
just
All
don't.
of that stuff is not the point. It's yeah.
Yeah.
It's a both and situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, my question when I've seen that, I've just been like, I'd love to hear your definition of hate, because I've tried to be as fair and objective as I'm looking at this as possible. And this does not come from a place of hate. And I think if there's a danger when we just use those words, and I mean, I suppose it's maybe the flip side of the way that we use love, and you see that, like I pointed out, the I love yous at the end of
Right.
a lot of those interviews, and it's like, that's not real love. Like it's a cheapening of that word, I would say. And
Yeah.
that kind of idea of haters be haters. You're hating, on the one hand, it cheapens that, but it also deflects, and it says anything that is accountability, anything that is trying to bring some responsibility to the table and say, hold on, can we do things better here? There's something not quite right here. Oh, you're hating me. And to me, that's an incredibly childish reaction.
Yeah.
An emotionally unintelligent, childish reaction, where you interpret any kind of accountability for something that you've done, or a question for, like, was that, what, tell me about your thinking there, or whatever it is, as hate. Oh, you
Yeah.
hate me, you hate this. And it's just completely unhelpful, and dangerous, I would say. When you dismiss accountability as hate, you allow all sorts of things to then just go unchecked, and we end up in places similar to where we already are today, I would say. But yeah.
Exactly. In my book, Courage, I talk about snitches, that we're taught, don't be a snitch. And but that's also the verbiage that's kind of used by child predators of, don't, if you tell anybody, I'm going to hurt your parents. Um, there's something very wrong with our society right now, that we have been conditioned that if we speak up and speak out, that we're doing something wrong. If we speak to truth, if we speak to justice, if we speak to equality, to equity, to just creating a more humane existence, that somehow we're taking a side, and that side is some kind of hate. I don't understand it. I've had to remove myself. I can't even identify politically anymore with a particular party, because it's all become too toxic. I don't want to identify with my ethnicity. I don't want to identify with my spiritual, religious background, with with anything, because everything that I attach myself to is something that, on the opposite end, I'm cutting myself off from. It's also the concept of doing what we're doing that we're supposed to have a brand. I don't want to have a brand. I'm not a brand. I'm a human being. I want to encompass everything that every other human being encompasses so that I can connect. I don't even, honestly, Andy, I don't even know the definition of hate. And I used to read dictionaries for fun. Like, I can't tell you what the definition of hate is. I can't. All I know is it I would think that it is the opposite of love, and that love is to have a deep, endearing, caring, and intensity of caring for another person or being. And so that perhaps hate is the opposite of that. And if that's what hate is, I don't have that. Why on earth would I ever allow a feeling like that in my body? Our bodies become sick if we hold toxic thoughts like that and feelings. I don't want to have hate towards I don't want to have anger. We need some anger to survive sometimes, but I don't want to have any emotion that isn't love, that isn't compassion, that isn't enlightenment, that isn't connection. Like that is where I'm coming from. That's what I care about. And I don't understand the mentality. I don't know, like, what's happening is this a generational thing? Am I just too old? Is this like something that's being taught in school? Is this because of the internet? Like, I don't even understand the whole concept of what a hater is.
Hmm. I don't know. I mean, we could get into a whole philosophical conversation about the meaning of hate. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like and we won't, but it feels like, yeah, both the opposite and also the same, occupying the same place as love, where it's an attachment or a fascination or like a connection with somebody, but maybe the desire to do harm rather than the desire to do good or whatever it might be. And I often think the opposite of love is indifference. It's a not caring, actually, and hate feels like you you are defined by the feelings that you have towards that other person, and this antipathy that I just want them to suffer or whatever, which is obviously not what we've covered that. Like, this is not about that at all.
No.
And I think for me, there's maybe indifference would be the word for the feeling that I have towards Mel, because I don't know her. And it's not about her at all. This is about, as you said so eloquently, like, just doing right by Cassie and sort of, yeah, protecting that rather
Right.
than going after Mel. And it's like, yeah, actually, I couldn't really care less about Mel. Yeah, but I do want that accountability to be there because I care about what is going on in this situation.
And that
Yeah.
every person that asks those questions of you or of me, I want to, like, look at them and hold their hand and look them in the eyes and say, you realize I'm doing this because you're Cassie. I'm Cassie. Like, this is not just about some person I don't know. This is something that could happen to any of us. Don't you want someone who cares enough to protect you?
That's such a great point. Yeah, we're all Cassie. Yeah, if you take this situation. And I think that's a really great place to finish as well. I don't know if there's anything else that you have to say on this, or anything that has
I
been
think,
burning away. But
yeah, just that you've done a great job. I'm so grateful to you that you came across my piece in the Guardian and then just reached out to me and then ran with it. And you did incredible work. You took this to a whole other level. And I really believe you helped the movement, and you've helped people um to wake up and to care. And it's little things like this, each of us just doing the most that we can, the best that we can, that's going to create the world that we want to live in. So I really appreciate the work that you've done. And I'm really happy to finally meet you. And I hope to work together in other things.
Yeah, this has been fantastic. And I want to just, echo right back at you the appreciation for your writing and for how, let's say, not just kind of breaking of the story or the writing of the story and documenting it so methodically and helpfully, but also the values that you have clearly shown through the writing of that as well, which is very much connected. So yes, really appreciate that. And I'm very impressed with your ability to articulate things on 1 hour sleep. So it's incredible.
Well, hopefully it slowed me down a little bit. I told you I was worried about being a loose cannon, so I tried to rein myself in.
Oh, yes, it's been wonderful. Yes, and likewise, great to meet you. And
You
I really
too.
appreciate you taking the time to go through this with me.